when I joined, they were still backing up to CDs. And I did sort of just like, who does CDs anymore? Like, let's not do that.
I'm with Brett Morris, one of my oldest pals. That's it. That's the show.
You mean old age-wise?
Yeah, I haven't known you very long. One of my oldest aged pals.
Yeah, 89 years old.
You are a legend in the podcast world. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you.
I was more intimidated about talking to you about podcast than anyone I have talked to and probably will talk to, because I feel like I'm talking to a legend.
Thanks, man.
Definitely owe you a big chunk of my career because you interviewed me.
That's right. I did interview you. But also, even before that, you were the Improv for Humans intern. Yeah.
And I still remember that one because you couldn't make it, so Josh filled in for you. And at a certain point, Besser's like, so you're like familiar with the show and Earwolf and stuff? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like you, Brett. And I kind of motioned toward like where you would sit. And then Matt was like, that's not Brett.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a quick training for Josh.
You're like, you're Scott Ackerman. That's Brett.
That's Brett.
I know this very well. Yeah.
It was a ton of fun. And I've talked about my intro to the podcast world a couple times now. I'm very excited to chat with you about yours because I think it's very unique and not like most people's. And I'm going to start with I vaguely remember you on a podcast a long time ago talking about like, was it like getting off a plane and then like Scott and some comedian picked you up? Or am I confusing your story with someone else's? I remember a story about like maybe it was Jeff Ulrich. Like he was like, I got off the plane at LAX and Scott and Zach Galifianakis picked me up. But I guess that was Jeff Ulrich's story and not yours.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like mine.
I was like, I don't remember that.
You're doing it again. You're doing the Besser thing.
Yeah. That's that was Josh. That was also Josh.
That was Josh, man. They picked him up in a private jet to meet Scott
in the PJ. But how did you get in the Earwolf world?
Yeah, so I came in through, music. Yeah, I was a musician, and then through music, I started production and like teaching myself engineering and mixing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I decided then I realized through production in this kind of work, I can actually maybe make some money, like just playing gigs and stuff wasn't really cutting it. So
yeah,
I was like, I can do this for other bands or maybe other applications. We'll see. And then my really good friend Cyrus, actually, who I go way back with, he was an early engineer at Earwolf, and but he didn't plug me in directly to Earwolf. He plugged me into kind of comedy, I recorded a few super serious shows. I don't think those haven't happened for a long time, but they were live shows, kind of like Comedy Death Ray, just like a lot of stand-ups and stuff.
That's the Sirius XM paywall is super serious.
Super serious, yeah. Where if you laugh, you get fined.
$40.
Yeah. No, I did like a couple of those, and then I recorded Jeff Ulrich. Speaking of Jeff, he hired me. He caught wind of me somehow.
Yeah.
And hired me for a show at Nerd Melt, Meltdown.
Is this 2010-ish? Does that sound right?
This is 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And then
You couldn't give me that. No, I'm just kidding.
and yeah, and then Jeff like interviewed me. He talked about Earwolf and bringing me onto Earwolf, and then yeah, basically I started Earwolf in like 2012, and it was just like I really didn't have experience with comedy or recording, specifically podcasts or comedy. It felt like, oh, this is cool. Like I can like produce stuff during the day and play gigs at night or whatever.
Yeah,
like
totally.
Because like a job in audio, that's kind of a rarity, or at least it was. Like podcasting wasn't a major thing, so it all felt kind of like super niche and just like unusual and kind of a fun thing to get into. And also just, yeah, it's kind of a rare thing. I didn't want to be a live sound guy. Like that wasn't what
the clip
my
is just going to be
goal
you
was.
saying, I didn't want to be alive. I'm with Brett Morris.
Yeah. And I just I'm not like a sound guy, like at live venues and stuff. I never wanted to do that kind of work. So, it fit well. And then very quickly being plugged into the comedy scene, it was like eye opening, and just felt like there was so much opportunity, and I was learning
Totally
about myself and my own skills and how to apply them, and had ideas for improving the place. And then
here you are.
Yeah, Earwolf for the next like 10 years, and then
that's wild.
Split off with Scott.
Yeah,
did CBB World,
Mr. CBB World,
and just like 10,000 podcasts in between.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, can't even count.
When at that time, I know it's a lot different now, but definitely then I feel like the engineer was also the producer, the editor, you were recording.
The janitor.
Yeah, the janitor.
Like, seriously.
What was that? I imagine that was extremely, and on mic, like you were on all of these shows too. Was that, how hard was that for you? Because I think now like podcasting in 2024, 25 is people have like a very specific role that they do. And the sort of catch-all thing that you and I do, I feel like I'm like seeing less and less of, and it's now more like I do this very specific thing, but I do it very well. Did you know you were going to have all of those roles when you started, or how was that?
No, not at all. Especially any on mic stuff that wasn't part of the of the job at all. I mean, a lot of it is because we were a startup. Like, it was truly like one little office and just a handful of employees. And so we didn't have producers. Like, that wasn't a title we even had back then. It was just an engineer at the table and the podcast hosts.
Yeah.
And we were just expected to sort of like know how to do the whole thing, because no one else at the company knew anything. And like it was all expected to be done, on a shoestring. And I was expected to just kind of like get all the equipment running and set up and know how to engineer it and record it and mix it. And like people didn't even know the delineations between those roles, or like it just wasn't the idea of having like a separate recordist and a separate editor plus like producers, waiting in the wings with notes and stuff. That just wasn't even like thinkable.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had to do everything, including like I wasn't even joking, like washing dishes and stuff, and like we had to go to the bathroom. It was fucking so gross. And just like lazily washing dishes in the sink, of the Earwolf bathrooms, and then cleaning up, and so we were by sort of by extension, the producers and the engineers and the editors and everything. And I do like it. I've sort of, I'm naturally kind of like someone who doesn't just want to do one thing. I just didn't, I didn't like come into the role just like wanting to be hyper specific. Like I only edit, I only do line edits and stuff. And I tend to just be more someone who wants to be part of the creative process or just think of ideas and improve things and just like problem solve. So, that kind of jack of all trades things like lends itself to something, I gravitated towards.
Totally.
But you're right. Like now that it's been like so professionalized or whatever, the industry, now it's like there's just hyper specific roles for every single part of the process. And that as Earwolf grew and then became like Scripts and Sirius XM, and we went into it, more, we did every single type of podcast there is to do. And I've been part of all those different configurations, but generally I like just kind of doing my thing and not being part of like a huge group with like too many cooks.
Yeah.
It's just feels like too many cooks, like immediately in those situations. And I always just think like, if you just have one or two people who are actually have like a head on their shoulders and are technically like competent and can learn things on their own and you can just make the entire thing happen. Like there's no reason you need dozens of people to make like 1 hour of content,
Yeah.
But also I was lucky too. I mean, we're lucky we work with people who are naturally gifted entertainers, and they knew how to they're improvisers, like literally. So they know how to like fill the time and make it entertaining all the way through. They know how to talk. They know how to share a moment with each other and not talk over each other. Like there's so many natural gifts that they bring to the table that don't need somebody over their shoulder telling them like what to do and how to do it. That that's the last thing they need. So I never saw that necessarily as my role, more so just to like help it along and help see their own thing to fruition.
It made the experience for me a lot more enjoyable, because I feel like a lot of maybe not a lot, but some of the hosts we were working with were just like appreciative that, we were there and helping out and stuff. So I didn't really feel the, micromanaging, like host over the shoulder of like, no, you're doing this all, like a very tense, stressful, like introduction into podcasting. In addition, like to what you're saying, the hosts being like improvisers and stand-ups that were like great on their feet. I think we also, we're just working with like good people that were like trusting us enough. And then if we needed help, they could jump in. Another thing I just wanted to circle back on is, so I started listening to Earwolf in 2011, 12, I guess 13, doesn't matter. Now I'm doing that. But I was in college and I was like getting into podcasts. I heard about This American Life and I was like, well, I like comedy. I should check out Comedy Pods. And the level of quality between like an Earwolf show and another, any other network or an independent show, it was so drastically different. Like, in addition to the conversation and stuff being really funny, just the sound alone was truly like going from like 4K to like from like 480 to 4K. And I know you were a huge part of that. I mean, kind of like what you were saying before, you're able to take what you were learning with like music production into that, basically.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I tend to kind of play down. I don't know. I'm not that good at I don't know, focusing so much on the technical part of it. Like I tend to just kind of be like, oh yeah, you just do it. Like it's not that hard. But that took me by surprise in a way, because I did just bring I didn't just like come in and immediately like revolutionize the game, you know,
Sure,
like
yeah.
I took what the standards were at the time, how I was trained to do it. And then to me, there were like just, I thought it was kind of obvious, like, oh, why are we just doing it in mono? You know, like why are we compressing to like 64-bit MP3,
Yeah.
you know, shit ass audio? Like it's just like there's so many things that were like laughably bad, even just the way we did it, or that was like rough and I don't know. I was just surprised to then sort of listen out to the even now, like the landscape of podcasting, just how bad most of them sound, or a lot of them sound.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was like being super perfectionist, like trying to achieve crazy, you know, dark side of the moon, like sound quality. But I was thinking just like, why not do this like well? I guess that was the music mixing ear and sort of skill set I brought into it, like knowing more plugins and sound things, what to do, but also being a balance, because there's a lot of engineers who know a lot more about that stuff,
for sure,
I would say, than I do necessarily. But I think it took just a certain like no nonsense, no fuss approach of doing it. Of like, what I actually was most proud of is like just streamlining a lot of that stuff and making it fast, and like replicable. To me, that was the name of the game. Is like, how do we make like 30 of these a week pretty easily, like no matter who's engineering it, rather than like, no, like give it all to me and I'm gonna pour over it every second of it, you know, all day long, and being super precious about it.
That's another thing you did that I really appreciated. I appreciate all these things so much more in hindsight, but in the moment, it was just like, oh, cool, I get to sit with Brett and learn how to edit ads. This is really fun. But then seeing like something you did that I like understand better now is like the templates that you set up was not only easy to make it like things easier for yourself and the other engineers, but like Dana, Josh, me, like people were able to come in and not have a full-on panic attack anytime like someone needed to hop into the studio for like a quick thing. You know, you and I imagine some other people, but mostly you, created these templates so that people could come in and record and not be like so scared. So I think you opened up this like doorway for people at Earwolf that they were able to kind of come in a much more confident way. Like, you know, similar to
For sure.
what you were saying, I was like, I didn't have a ton of, you know, audio engineer experience, but I was able to come in and be like, well, Brett set us up for success, so I can do this and not be like, sorry, I can't help you at all.
Right. I mean, I would say even it allowed people who didn't know how to do it at all to come in and record a podcast. Sure. And that sort of became, you know, at times it almost rubbed me the wrong way, because like I was proud of being able to, you know, facilitate all of that. But at a certain point, like you should still kind of know a little bit of what you're doing. But yeah, we did set it up to a point where like it could literally be one button on this big mixing board that would intimidate a lot of people. Yeah. But you just like, I would just set it up so it's like you press this one button and everything goes to its place. And then, you know, you bring up a Pro Tools template and you just hit this like 1, 2, 3, hit these buttons, and you're recording a podcast and it'll sound like the podcast that I record, you know? Yeah. So that was the goal. And I think it did help grow the whole team and like bring in a diverse group of people of all, you know, backgrounds and abilities, and able to just like jump in and helm a podcast. Yeah. But I'm a big believer in the templates and just like thinking ahead.
I kind of viewed that as like the training phase for like me. And then what was really helpful was being able to then sit in recordings with you and then just watch like your workflow and how you worked. And then when I would record and I would accidentally click like E and it would make the track the entire screen.
Yeah.
And I'd have to call you and be like, something happened. You'd be like, okay, so click E again. And I'd be like, okay, I'm good. Thank you. There was a lot of like panic calls to you and Ryan and Sam and stuff. And so, yeah, that was like definitely a, you know, you guys made it like very not intimidating. The combo of like being able to walk in, you know, and the other thing too is like all of the microphones and the board and stuff were very like high quality, you know, recording at other, you know, not even networks, but just other places. And then just seeing like, oh, this is a lower end mic. This is going to make my job later harder. And then just seeing like, hey, if we can get something a little nicer, it actually makes a huge difference when you're listening to it. Now what was kind of interesting too in the like 2012 and then I came around like 2015, 16, Earwolf really started to grow. I'm always fascinated by like, and we'll probably talk about this with CBB World as well, managing, you know, when you started there was like, a couple shows, like 6 or 7. Does that sound right? At Earwolf?
At Earwolf?
Yeah. Or was there a lot more?
No, that's probably right. There was like CBB, Who Charted, Scarborough Country,
Improv for Humans,
Professor Blastoff,
Rana and Bev, maybe.
Rana and Bev, but they weren't like every week.
Sure.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Wolf Den.
But also in those days too, and this is another thing that I felt like was a turning point in terms of like the production capacity we had. Like we used to literally, you know, we'd record a 2-hour podcast and then the mixing and the editing stage was taking plugins like one by one.
Yeah.
And rendering across the whole 2 hours.
That's brutal.
Each one. And there was no such thing. This is like technical, but in Pro Tools, there was no such thing as like offline bounce back then. Like I had to get creative to think of like, how do I do this so I'm not stuck rendering something for 2 hours? Because the only way to bounce a track then was in real time. Yeah. So you're waiting 2 hours as it's like printing. Yeah. All your edits. So we just did it was always about like developing all these workarounds to make it faster. And so we used to just one by one, it took forever, like print each plugin over the entire track and then consolidate it. And there's all these little tricks to make it go a little bit faster, but it still took hours to do one podcast.
Oh my God.
But then that was another thing where I was like, I come from slightly outside of the like pro audio world where there's a sort of an old guard that's like very precautious about everything. And there's like the right way to do it. And you shouldn't take shortcuts and stuff. Yeah. So I was like a little bit bold that way, like more risk taking that way. But I did like I developed the system early on in Earwolf where we were like printing out all the plugins at the same as we were recording. Yeah. Which was like a bigger risk to actually like crash the recordings. But at the end of it, we had the whole thing like ready to go basically. So we could just suddenly like bring on like dozens more podcasts. It felt like, and we weren't like totally swamped between just 2 engineers in those days.
Well, that and 3. Yeah. Another thing that you had that I'm a big advocate for, and everyone should be, is you guys had backup recordings just automatically going. So even if you like forgot to hit record, it would automatically record a backup for you. And that's a big thing that I push with other networks and people that are recording, if they're able to have any sort of backup just to be safe.
That was one of the things early on before when I joined, they were still backing up to CDs and they would like,
that's awesome.
Cody would be like, you're really supposed to burn a CD, you know, like,
oh my God,
you want a hard copy? It was very old school. There's like old school kind of radio mentality. Yep. And I did sort of just like, what's the who does CDs anymore? Like, let's not do that. You know, there's like faster, easier ways to do this. So I was always trying to look for like newer, faster ways. But yeah. Eventually we hooked up the backup recorder and had that on an auto setting.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you're saying, so it's so automatic that it's harder to fuck up, you know, because losing one was just catastrophic.
Yeah. So you go from like 7 shows to in like 2018, 2019, like 30 plus. And in addition to, you know, being a talented engineer, what comes with this is now you're like the lead engineer, and now you're managing a team of several people. How was that experience for you? Because I find that interesting with like producers and engineers and editors, and I think other industries have this as well. Like, you could be a very talented TV writer, and then after several years, you could be a showrunner, and that's like a completely different job than when you started as like a TV writer. Now you're in charge of several departments and stuff. How was that like change for you, starting as like someone just hired to record to now managing, you know, an entire department and working with other departments?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it felt like I enjoyed it. I loved my team and I loved all the engineers, and like I liked being able to think of ways to improve, you know, what we did and like train people. And I feel that's one thing I do kind of like miss about those days, because right now I'm just sort of a one-man operation.
Yep.
I don't love managing. I didn't like, that wasn't some dream of mine to like manage people, because there's obviously headaches that come with it. Yeah. But I do like teaching. It was fun to like teach and impart things I learned and to learn from other people. Yeah. And share knowledge and stuff. That is one thing I've thought about, like if I had some extra time, just like almost doing what you're doing and just like sharing all these things I've discovered, you know, along the way.
Totally.
Because I've just developed like so many weird little quirky ways of making comedy podcasts, you know, over the years that I don't think other people do. But
you totally should do that.
But I liked managing up to a point, and then it was an interesting thing though, because I felt like protective of it. I felt more like since I was doing the same work that my engineers were doing, but also leading them. I wasn't like a true manager where it's like, and I think there was pressure along the way. It kind of sucks. Like I don't know why our economy or like the market works this way, but like skilled positions, like technical positions that require like technical knowledge and skill, like why management is considered
part of that,
a more valuable thing than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and not that it's not valuable, but like why are you pressured to like give up the stuff you're really good at? Yeah. With, just to manage the team of the people doing what you once did. You know what I mean?
It's kind of an awkward part of that. Yeah.
I was very reluctant to give up the actual work I enjoyed doing to just be like a full-time manager. I just never allowed that to happen. So that might have like hampered my upward mobility at Earwolf after a while. Yeah.
But, same. You know, it was interesting watching I know you're working on 6 shows, and this isn't just an Earwolf thing. This is probably most networks. Like, I know you're working on multiple shows that you really enjoy. You need to pick 3 that you're no longer going to work on, and now you're going to be a manager, which is a completely different skill set than it's like you maybe don't always get promoted because you're a good manager. You're getting promoted because you're good at your job, and then you have maybe some like leadership skills, but then kind of you get put in that situation that's not super fun of like, okay, well, I really like working on X, Y, and Z shows, but I have to pick 3 that I can no longer work on so that I can be a manager, which is kind of fascinating because, like you said, you feel like a bond with those people. And like you said, it's an interesting situation because you are also doing the job with them, which is like some other managers just like aren't really doing that job at all. So you're in the trenches with them, but then you kind of are like, well, this is also a completely different job. So
yeah, so it felt like having two jobs at times. And also, I felt more like a captain of the team.
Totally.
Sometimes than just like, I just didn't have any desire to just be a pure manager.
Yeah.
And like set meetings all week and look at their schedules. And like, to me, that took the whole reason I was there out of the equation. I like making stuff with people. So
yeah.
But it was really rewarding for a long time. And, you know, then you just become the representative for the rest of the company to talk to about making all the content and how to get it done. But yeah, there was this sort of, I watched as the industry sort of came into the podcast industry and they did sort of start creating like hard divides between engineers and producers and other people involved. And it sort of started to become like feeling like in the best days, I felt like you were really involved in the whole of it. And then it started feeling like you're more like siloed off or like you're not supposed to have any opinions. You're knob tweakers, you know? And it was just like, what? Like we basically built this place.
That's that transition that we were talking about earlier of today, people having like very specific roles. I feel like we both experienced that of it was fun being able to do a little bit of everything. And then as that shift happened, it was kind of like encouraged for us to like not do that anymore. And it now became a like, well, now we want you to do a very specific role, even though you had spent, several years before that doing a little bit of everything. There felt like a shift as the industry shifted a little, like 2018, 2019, it became a like, instead of doing, a little bit of everything that you enjoy, we now want you in a very siloed specific role, which became interesting.
Right. And also it didn't feel wise. I mean, we were so close with the hosts and everything. Like they really trusted us. And we worked really well with them. So to like try to gatekeep all of that didn't really make sense. And then also, there was other engineers too that would come in, or some people coming into engineering who are very much like, I don't want it. There's almost like a learned helplessness with that. It was just like, I'm being asked to think right now and I don't want to do that. Like, I only make cuts. Like, what are you asking of me? And so that can also be frustrating of just like, what do all the people do all day? My natural tendency is just be like, leave us alone and just let us make make funny stuff. But
were there any other big noticeable changes in that era that like stuck out to you? Obviously, like the big flashy like celebrity hosting, I think was like a big part of that. And then as actors and stuff and A-list celebrities, I think that obviously was a big part of the culture shift. Obviously, with our experience, being acquired twice by multi-million and then $1 billion company was another cultural shift. Were there any other ones that like kind of stuck out to you as moments in that time where you were like, wow, this is maybe for better or for like, could be either way of like, for better or for worse?
I definitely feel like the radio people, like old guard sort of radio people from like WNYC or like places like that definitely like started to descend in and take sort of a lot of the higher roles and sort of start to shape it more like how they were used to making stuff. Yeah. Which is like very top down decision making. And it would be like, like their idea of making a podcast was very much like, let's gather like a council of elders, and like decide like what market we should really hit and demographic. And we need this type of, we need like a cooking based show. Okay. Who can do that? And how should it go? It's like formatting and spending like a year just like thinking of ideas versus the way we always did it, which was like the talent dictates what they want to do. Or we just knew all these funny people who were super talented on their own and could just do it. Like they had the better ideas and they knew what they were passionate about. So it was more like, let's give the mic to them and what do you want to do with it? You know what I mean? And then let's work from there and make it great. It became kind of like trying to make these marks and, and the ad money started just drifting to like celebrity based shows or shows that the ad departments understood how to pitch,
Yeah.
So there's like frustration developing where like certain shows that got a great amount of people, like a lot of people listening, through no fault of their own, their show didn't dip or they didn't do anything wrong. Would just start getting like less of a cut, less attention or whatever.
Yeah.
And just the more new people come in, I feel like they just naturally kind of look down on stuff that came before them.
100%.
Cause like, I guess everybody's ego a little bit wants to just be like, wait till they get a load of me, like they want to come into a place and be like, okay, like there's the before me era and the after me and everything I'm a part of.
Well, and I think like with that
innovating.
Yep. And I think with that, something that we've seen that can be a bummer on many places is with the new people, new departments. Part of that is a focus on new shows, and then the shows that like helped establish a place and get it to where it was kind of get pushed behind a little bit. And there's more of a focus on the shiny new toy. And then with that focus on the shiny new toy, you're not really setting up the older shows for success when just more resources get allocated to the shiny new toy. So then I think it kind of creates this cycle of older shows being like, well, yeah, of course our numbers aren't growing. There's more focus on the new show.
Right. And the whole idea of like, for whatever reason, which seems obvious to me, like the whole idea of investing, like putting money behind something to grow it, like knowing you're going to lose that, knowing you're going to, put in money you're not necessarily going to make back right away. You're just investing in the brand or investing in this show and marketing, etc.
Yeah.
Seemed like a foreign concept at times where it just became a kind of thing of like, you need to make your own. It reminded me of like old record company deals of like, the only money that gets put in your show is money that your show makes. Like you have to bootstrap yourself to your own marketing, where it's like, well, okay, well then what's the point of a network exactly? Like I thought the whole point was we all grow and pitch in together, So I think there's a lot of good things that came out of, growth in those years and a lot of really cool people getting involved, very smart people. But yeah, I think like I always tried to keep an eye towards like what built it in the first place, like what really worked at its core was always really simple. That never really changed. And I still think that formula is still like the winning formula,
Absolutely. Yeah. Like not taking the talent of the host's talent for granted. Cause I think we see that sometimes where it's like, well, we're going to trust the salesperson who told us, for Q4, we should be focusing on sport shows.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to reverse engineer a sport show with someone that doesn't really want to do it.
And also just like the whole idea, like not every situation is the same for each show, but like we work a lot with these alternative comedy shows or whatever you call them, where there'll be like a diehard fan base.
Yeah.
And that's a really strong thing and like, you don't have to be something else. Like you can make that work for you and have like a great career out of it, without costing too much or throwing all these fancy things at it or bringing in way too many people or whatever. Like you can keep it small and niche and still grow.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a winning formula from the start, because that's kind of how we started out.
I think that patience gets taken for granted today too, that a lot of these like big shows, or even not even big, like number wise, any sort of subjective version of success, like they're really fun and popular in a different way. I think a lot of them don't happen overnight. They take like years and years to build.
Yeah.
And I think in the TikTok era that we're in, people just don't want to wait. And so we kind of get put in this tricky spot of like, well, that show took 5 years to really get to where it is today. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes like if people ask me for advice, like I don't even know necessarily what to do, like starting out in 2024. Because like you can attribute a lot of success to some of those older shows, like even Joe Rogan or whatever. It's like he was there at the very early, end of it, and has just very consistently put out shows since then and built this, giant mega audience.
Yeah.
And like there's a huge amount to be said. It's like Mark Maron and them too, and CBB. It's like being early and being super consistent is huge. And and being allowed to take that time and build the audience. And it was like Hollywood Handbook. Like I was there at when they started. I recorded, I think, the first reality show with them.
Yep.
But that was like an exciting thing I've seen happen a couple times, where it's just like it couldn't have started out smaller, just like and just more of a fun thing in the room. And then from there it was like who likes this? Like it was like genuinely small, but watching the audience just slowly start to being like, oh my God, is this my favorite show? I think it might be, and like swapping inside jokes and just building from there. And it's like a really organic fan base being built. That took a couple years for it to like really feel like a true buzz,
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I feel like a big thing when I chat with people about new pods. It's like, it's basically that of you really have to accept that probably won't make any money in the beginning, because you're competing with hundreds of thousands of shows. But if you're consistent, like you said, it could eventually, become really big. So 2018, 2019, we see definitely like a shift in the industry. Some things good, not a lot are great. And around 2020, you and I both leave Earwolf and kind of do our own separate things. I go with the Hollywood Handbook Boys, and then you start Comedy Bang Bang World with Scott. What was the experience like for you after 10 plus years working with hundreds and hundreds of people over that period to just solo Brett time?
Yeah, I mean, it was super exciting, but also scary. It was like a big risk. I before I talked to Scott and we developed the Comedy Bang Bang World idea.
Yep.
I was sort of ready for the next thing, or ready to move on, out of just like really just doing what I felt like what I could at Earwolf,
Mhm.
and also just feeling like slightly just ready to leave that situation. But really having I was just always worried like, oh, maybe that could just never happen again. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Mhm.
I don't know how to replicate that necessarily anywhere else. It just wasn't totally clear. I was thinking of going into very different types of businesses, but yeah, with Scott, we started talking on the phone, and it just made so much sense, and building off of Comedy Bang Bang, and it felt like resetting
Mhm.
in like a really fun way.
Same.
And having to go back into that very small operation and just be quick on my feet and think of how to make it happen for X amount of money or whatever. And just like, how can we really do this? And it was so fun to think of just the kind of shows we were talking about doing, and working with and how simple the sort of business end of it was. Like, it
Yeah.
didn't feel shady at all. It didn't feel like we were trying to take advantage of anyone, or it just felt like a simple operation. You know what I mean? Like, we get to pay our friends to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I was watching a lot of frustration, and like really talented people get let down.
Yeah.
And like good friends of mine get frustrated, or run out of the network, or whatever, like run out of their ideas. And that felt shitty. Like, I hated watching that happen. So it felt good to just like be able to say, yes, like, let's make it, like your dumbest idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if it's funny and we trust you to make it funny, like, let's just do it and see how it goes. And we have like a model that works for that. But it was like kind of scary to just be like, will this work? Will I miss that? Will it just like not work out? And
Yeah.
all those questions. But it has been like, it's just been awesome. And now it's been, all the people basically come over to my house to record it. So I don't feel, I was also worried about like, oh, would I just be stuck behind the scenes and not actually like in the room with people, and
Yeah.
just, or wondering like, where are we going to record? How are we going to do this?
Mhm.
So all of that's worked out in a really cool way. And just focusing on the part of making podcasts that I really enjoy the most, which is hanging out, with people, and
Yeah.
just like making it as a team, and and then there is the technical side of it and putting them together and everything, but it's like, I get to just sort of be in charge of that and make it the way I like to make it. And nothing like there's just no, there's none of that like kind of pressure, or that constant like grow mentality of like,
Yeah.
even when things are going super well, it feeling like, oh, it's not enough, and there needs to be more, and needs to be, I don't know. There's, it just feels like it's in it organically, like it's at an equilibrium, and we can just keep at the level we're at, for a while.
Because I also feel like sometimes those hyper fixations on the business side of it can accelerate things for better and for worse. Of maybe you try new things, but then it could also make everyone feel like, wow, this is like what we were talking about earlier, of like kind of reverse engineering ideas of like, well, we see this does well. What if we try to do something like this? But then getting back to what you're saying is, what was and is so fun about the job is just creating really fun content with people you like and people that you trust. And that's what was such a bummer, a few years ago, is like doing meetings with really cool people that have a really funny idea, but it's like, the network doesn't see this getting 60,000 downloads per episode in the first 6 weeks. So you, extremely talented person with a great idea, unfortunately we have to pass. And it was like, wow, that's crazy. But now with this model, being able to be like, hey man, yeah, we like you and want to do something with you. And then you can get creative with the, like how you want to release it, of like, we could try an 8-episode thing. And if it does well, we could do 20 more. You can't really do that with a free show. You can't experiment, unfortunately, financially, with like an 8-episode run. It needs to be like 26 or 52 or something. So I really like that model a lot.
Definitely.
And CBB World, I think, was set up so well because Scott has so many insane characters on. I'm sure that was like a very fun stage for you guys, getting to like pick and choose, like, you know, which characters, which improvisers, you know, do we want to like explore their world and try to do things with. I've told you before, I think Hey Randy is like an insanely funny show. And just being able to be like, okay, that was, you know, people really like that character and the characters around that. So let's try a couple episodes. So what was that experience like for you in the kind of early building out of the CBB world? Like, did you and Scott like meet and then kind of discuss like, you know, which characters would be interesting to like try a little run with?
Yeah, Scott sort of had roughly, you know, the idea behind CBB World in mind. Or he had the CBB Presents idea. He had the Scott Hasn't Seen idea, but the CBB Presents was really exciting. Yeah, just that would be our vehicle to give our friends podcasts and allow them to explore their characters or new ideas if they had them. And that felt like a really cool way to, like you said, expand Comedy Bang Bang, and like in a way that really makes sense, and also for the fans to already be excited about. Because that's another thing that's tough in podcasting, is like fans, what's the word for it? Like their expectations, their expectations going in, if they already have a thing that they're already a fan of, they're much more likely to listen to the show, you know? That's why shows like How Did This Get Made was genius to do it so early on. But then that became the model for everything, to, in my opinion, kind of oversaturated. But just that idea of attaching the premise of the show to an already popular thing, like watching bad movies, you know what I mean? Or it could be The Office or whatever. Like people already like The Office. They're super committed fans to that. So
reality shows and stuff.
I'm going to listen to the show that's about The Office, or, so it was a cool kind of thing to do for Comedy Bang Bang fans. Just be like, I love that character. I want to hear them host their own show. And then, and having it all on one feed, and like being able to build a sort of like credibility with that feed fast, like putting really funny stuff in there, now makes it like the feed is valuable in itself. So we can justify, you know, putting new content on there, unexplored ideas. And it's like that you automatically get a certain listenership if you're on that feed. Right. So, I just love the model of that. And,
me too.
That's one thing, like I wish certain fans like maybe like understood a little bit more, or like sometimes we hear a certain idea, like putting certain shows on CBB Presents. Some fan here or there, you know, fans have conflicting thoughts on everything, but they'll be like, oh, I wish it was on its own feed, you know, because it's sort of easier for me to organize in my podcast player or whatever. Or they have in their heads this idea that feed is sort of like a, sort of almost like a, I have this smart camera where I go like this, and
Wow,
it just
they had zoomed in on you. That was cool.
That was weird. Extreme close up.
I was like, damn, Brett's about to say something powerful.
I want you to focus on my mouth as I say this. No, this idea that it's like a little testing feed and that shows like graduate out of or something.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, no, the feed is like, that's the place to be, you know, like that's the highest place to be. So it's like, it's a sign of respect and really believing in the show that it's on that feed. You know what I mean?
That
we're
and
giving
people,
it the most listeners they can get doing that, you know?
We had a similar thing with the handbook Patreon, and it's like, we're not even like able to do like a multi-feed thing. We can like filter it, might be able to do it in the future. It's been like years in the works.
Yeah.
But the other thing with it is people are now listening to stuff that they maybe wouldn't have listened to and then enjoy it. But if it was its own feed, maybe they would have just been like, I'll catch it one day, and then they never listened to it.
Exactly,
But
yeah.
because it's on a feed that has everything, then they're more likely to check it out.
Yeah. This kind of reminds me of like, this is a very different thing, but like when bands like change names or something, or like sometimes you'll have like angry fans being like, they should change their name. It's not the same as it used to be, you know?
For sure.
But then like you think from the band's perspective, they're like, okay, but then we're making like no money and nobody knows
starting
who
from
we
zero.
are. Yeah, like
Totally.
it's kind of asking a lot. But
I have like one or two more questions, then we'll jump into the podcast simulator thing. I think it's super impressive, the CBB World live shows that you guys do. Like when CBB goes on tour, I think it's like almost, it's more impressive every year somehow. This last one you guys did, I mean, what, like 40 plus shows, and then like 30 of them were all like within like 5 weeks, basically. How do you manage, and you're there at all of them, how do you manage doing that? And then the other thing, you know, and I'm sorry, I should have talked about this more earlier, you also work on Improv for Humans, Who Charted. I mean, the CBB World is like a massive undertaking, and probably like a ton of other shows as well. So when you're doing,
I put out something in the range of like 12 to 15 shows a week.
So
which I surprise myself with.
Totally.
That's like not normal.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I like pause it to people because I really like, I like having the opportunity, which this might be something I miss a little bit, but I occasionally have the opportunity to really pour my, like flex my production skills into one like beautiful piece of podcast art, you know, which I've been able to do a few times, like with Estates of Perfection or some of the Bob Duca specials we do.
Yep.
Or, you know, doing more musical stuff. I still get a creative outlet that way. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you know, you don't necessarily get more fan love for the amount of work that takes to put that in.
Totally.
And it's sort of like at the end of the day, do you want like 15 hours of Comedy Bang Bang style humor, like 15 hours of that content? Mm-hmm. Or do you want like 1 hour that has 15 hours of work put into it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of just feel like it's more fun to just have a lot, you know.
But I think you do it in the right way where you still like doing that though, but because it takes that much time, you just do that less frequently. So there's still 12 episodes coming out a week, and then a few times a year there is a thing that is, you know, has like 15 hours put into every episode, but because of that amount of effort, that's not coming out every week. That's coming out like a 6 episode thing, like once a year or something like that.
And so managing better at doing a lot in a fast amount of time. Like
the workflow is super efficient.
It's just doing things that are impactful, like the sound effects or whatever. Like try to do it live and fuck it up, and that's even funnier. Just finding little ways to make it fast.
I love chatting with you about all of your shortcuts that you have that you've spent a decade putting together. It's very fun talking to you about that. So how do you manage doing a 30 city tour over 5 weeks and managing to release 12, 15 episodes a week. I talked to Emma Erdbrink from Doughboys last week about like banking episodes. Are you able to bank as much as you can during that period?
Yeah.
Like, super fascinated by that.
It does feel crazy even for me to think back to. I'm like, how did I manage that? Definitely just a lot of banking episodes beforehand. Banked as much as I could with like all my different shows. Who charted just doing like 2 or 3 a week for weeks before the tour starts.
Yep.
Improv for Humans, same thing. Yeah, just banking and banking and banking. There's a big push before the tour to get like as much as I possibly can get done. It's just all sort of planning ahead. But then on tour, I am very much like focused on minimizing. I just find the time I can find like in between stops or in my hotel room, or oftentimes while they're on stage, I'm editing the previous night's show and releasing that.
Yeah, crazy.
So like I just figured out, again, it's all about figuring out the operation and like streamlining it for yourself.
Yeah.
And really knowing what you have to do and how to do it and getting super fast at it to where like most of that, I was putting out each night's show every single night.
Yeah. I think that's something a lot of hosts, definitely hosts, but also like maybe fans take for granted is probably too harsh of a way to describe it. But the next night, same day turnaround stuff in a lot of other industries, rightfully so, include like a huge rush fee. And I think that's just part of our job that we've had to like embrace is the like, okay, this was recorded tonight. It comes out in 24 hours. And then, like you said, being backstage with your laptop, editing an episode while the other one is being recorded, just so that the fans can experience it sooner rather than later, I think is like super generous as a producer engineer. So yeah.
Also,
I think,
you know, and then there's so much stuff that you're not hearing of just like working with the venues and prepping them on how it's going to go down, telling them what I need to record. Yeah. And then I get to the show a couple hours early and walk through the show with them and the pacing and the setup. Like I tell them how to set up the stage and there's just so much back and forth there. I had like good help from Corinne, Scott's assistant.
Yep.
With just putting together some of the materials to send them beforehand. And, but you know what? The cool thing is like the templates, I have my live show template just so dialed in.
Cool.
Like just such a stupid amount of like shortcuts for myself to just get that done fast. And then luckily with Comedy Bang Bang, we don't really edit it, you know, and we're just committed. And I love that about,
of course,
the type of shows we do too, is the minimal amounts of edits, you know, not just for my own workload, but I like stylistically, like how that,
me too.
I like the comedy that creates, you know,
it's way better.
And it's really easy to get in your head about over editing things and thinking that it'll be better because of that. And you can find a million reasons why each edit will make it better. But then when you take a step back and you actually listen to it, you're like, oh, it sounds insane now. Like, you have the same thing with mixing music too, where like you can do 90 mixes and you think you're getting better and better and better. And then you like step back and you listen to your second mix and you like it more than your 90th one. But anyway, so you know, there's just like a drilled in operation with it. But the cool thing is on tour, I felt like more, I almost felt like it's a vacation. And like it's very relaxed. I felt like super in the present. I could hang out and the whole thing felt like just hanging out with friends the whole time and going out every night after or usually with Carl. Like a lot of them didn't want to go out all the time, but it depends on the group. But it's super fun. I was very focused on like not taking myself out of what was fun about it. And
Yeah. Mm.
so you just make the work for you, you know? So a lot
That's
of
smart.
that was like, yeah, huge headaches, late nights beforehand. And then also getting back from tour. It's like, oh boy, like that's exhausting. Like coming back and just immediately having to like jump into a sprint and catch up, you know, being back into real time with daily deadlines.
Yeah.
That's tough. And then I always think to myself, like on tour, I'm like, why am I technically I'm doing like more work than ever, but why does it feel like way less? I'm like, oh, I should really bank episodes more like all the time. I should treat every week like it's tour.
Totally.
But,
it feels really good having anything banked. But I like your mentality too with the tour of it's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot that I have to do. But if I don't participate in the fun parts of it, then it's going to be almost worse. Like it's going to be a more stressful experience. So being able to like hang out with Carl and people and stuff, it allows you to like enjoy the whole experience as well, instead of it just being like, well, I'm never going to go out so that I can only do the work. It's like, well, you're going to burn out in a different way.
That's my own stubbornness too, of just like, I would rather work super intensely and rushed for like an hour than stretch it out over 5 hours and miss the fun, you know? So,
totally. Yeah.
I can pack it in.
That's awesome.
And worked out.
Thank you so much for chatting with me about that. I could talk to you all day about this, but I'm taking up so much of your time, and I think we should play a little quick game called Podcast Simulator.
Would you like to play a game?
This is something I've been putting together where basically I've created a podcast for you specifically to produce. This one is called Acts of Rage with Axel Rage. It is a punk interview podcast that I think you would enjoy working on. And so let us jump in about this show. I'm going to have to zoom in because I can't read that far. Okay, so here's the podcast Brett will be producing, engineering, and editing. 70s punk icon Axel Rage was the frontman of the legendary but short-lived group Vomit Vortex. The trio's high-energy sets and phenomenal first album, Fuckface, skyrocketed the band to stardom. Unfortunately, the three members did not see eye to eye on the group's future and often fought on and off stage. Vomit Vortex ended after 3 incredible albums. 50 years later, that's a crazy thing to say, on this new podcast, Axel talks to other punk and rock legends about their highest of highs and lowest of lows. Axel also tries to get a few juicy stories out of these rock legends as well. Brett Morris, what do you think about this show? Would you like to work on something like this?
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Hell yeah. I love that they censored their album Fuckface.
Yeah.
Super raw 70s punk, but they're like, don't say the F word, man. We can't say the F word.
Yeah, we can't do it. I know you and I are both.
Sounds fun. I'm already anticipating like how rough it's going to be to get this all done, like week to week, like have them stay on their mics.
Totally.
Yeah. Have them record themselves.
Yeah.
If it's Zoom.
We're going to get into all of that very soon. So your role, you have the 3-pronged role that I know you're used to: producer, engineer, and editor. With other shows, the producer role is pretty intense with like very specific things that are required. No surprise here, Axel does not want a lot of help. Like my first thought was like, oh, maybe you could have like a list of questions he could ask. I don't imagine this man wanting like prepped questions. I imagine he would just want to talk to people that he likes and knows. Maybe some questions, but big part of it is like scheduling the recordings, which I know you've experienced as like half of a job sometimes, is just trying to lock in times that work for everybody. This is a network show. Network picked it up, so you're working with them on the advertisers and trying to grow the show. And you're also responsible for recording and editing the podcast. The network is supplying a video editor, a booker that probably won't be used, marketing support, ad support. For this show, it is primarily all in studio, so you won't have to worry about crazy Zoom audio. That's the one kind of saving grace here is I didn't want to put you in a situation where you're trying to get a bunch of 82-year-olds to record locally.
Is that how old they are now?
Probably. I mean, they're
Hell
18. Yeah. We got,
Okay.
I'm going to say high 70s. If that tracks.
It was crazy. I went to an X show with Scott like earlier this year.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much this era, but it was crazy to see like the punk crowd really age into like some of the people, a lot of the people in the audience were like full on elderly people, but like former, LA punks. It was like, whoa.
What was the festival that we went to?
It's the first time punks have been this old,
it's crazy.
Ever. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the fest you and I went to a couple months ago? That was very fun. I don't remember what it's called.
Oh, No Values.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That was awesome.
But a similar thing, seeing people that like were playing in the early 70s and stuff and be like, oh man, the audience is awesome. So kind of a classic interview show, but with a cool punk host. So let's get into the first scenario. This is called Pilot's License. Axel is coming in hot with his first episode, interviewing a former band member, Ruby Voltage. Axel and Ruby fought constantly and haven't spoken in years. And boy, do they not disappoint. They go at it just like the old days, recounting multiple huge arguments and sharing never-before-heard stories. Even though they end on a somewhat good note, you receive an email from Ruby's assistant asking you to cut a lot of the arguing. You forward this to Axel. He says, no way. Brett, in this scenario, what would you do? Would you cut the arguing or would you not cut it? Those are the two options.
I would never cut that. I mean, if Axel says no way, I'm on his side.
Yep.
Every single time. If he wants to cut, I'll cut it. But I would make the case to him probably that a lot of that is great.
Yes.
And not just from like an exploitative standpoint, but just like
it's interesting.
That's a reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Brett went with do not cut it. You respond to Ruby's assistant that he would really prefer to keep the episode as is. You try to meet in the middle and you trim a few parts down, but you leave a majority of it. And because of that, the first episode is a hit. You get an A from the host and an A from the network.
Ooh, I get graded?
You get graded in each scenario. Next scenario.
That's what people don't realize at the old Earwolf days. We got grades every semester.
We got a report card.
Yeah.
After a few episodes, Axel's getting the itch to get back on stage. He's having fun being on mic and ready to do a few live shows of the podcast. His manager suggests you guys end each live show with a Q&A. Axel's not looking forward to this part, and so he says, when the questions start to get boring, Brett, I want you to start playing guitar really loud and drown them out.
I love that.
Do you do this? Do you shred or do you not participate in this?
Oh my God. Of course I shred.
Great. Brett
I was hoping I'd somehow get to contribute.
Brett chose shred. You bring your guitar to the first show and start to play when the Q&A drags on. Although the person asking the question is annoyed, it gets a big laugh and Axel loves it. People are a lot quicker with their questions going forward. Axel gives you an A. Go ahead.
This is how half the time I do contribute as a producer or what have you. It's just not in the typical ways of like, I'm going to give you a bunch of notes, but it's just like, hey, what do you need me for? What would be funny?
Yeah.
Or not need me for anything. I don't care. So
it's something I wanted to
get involved.
Talk to you about in the earlier chat was I talked to a few people this weekend that they're like, oh, who are you having on this week? And I said, Brett Morris. And all of them said, oh, he's so funny. He's so funny on obviously Handbook and Masterclass, but also Neighborhood Listen, Hey Randy, Who Charted. Just really quickly, I know like getting pretty good is a thing that you've heard annoyingly for years and years.
Thanks, Handbook fans.
Yep. How has that experience been for you? Similarly, a thing that was not on the job application, but is now like expected of you on so many shows is you're going to play guitar. You're going to, be a pivotal role. How has that been?
Yeah, I think going back, that would be another thing. I'm like proud of maybe setting a precedent or I don't know. I was discovering how to be on mic in those days and maybe passing that on a little bit too of like,
yeah,
it's a really careful balance because I never came into any of them with any kind of thirst to be on mic,
for sure.
But I do have a sort of like, I would have a enough of a confidence in myself that I really liked these people. I was friends with them off mic. And half the job is just being comfortable with them and being a good hang. And just being like, not pestering them with too many questions, not creeping them out, not being weird and aloof. You know what I mean? Just being like engaged enough, but not being annoying.
For sure.
And so I think like that. And then when they get to know you enough, or they see something funny in you, or they think it'd be funny to throw you in the mosh pit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get roasted for a segment. Just like figuring out what that looks like in podcasting and comedy podcasting and how to fit that role. And like, so that's just, the early on, I felt like, depending on the podcast,
sure.
But I always was, I mean, it may not be apparent because I, like you said, I have been on a ton of podcasts now, but I was so hesitant to ever probably like two in my head, probably to not say too much.
Yeah.
So I'd always just try to get in and out like as soon as I could to not be that guy. Yeah. Because I know that there were so many would-be improvisers or people on like UCB, 101 classes, like trying to knock down the door to be in that position and like try to make everyone laugh and be
super thirsty,
too thirsty. Didn't want to be like that, but I was okay slightly embarrassing myself if that felt like that was the role I was playing, but then getting trusted to actually say some funny things or be myself or characters, like when Tim, like for Hey Randy, I was not expecting to play Mark Padovano, or for Batman, I was not expecting to be Alfred, but then those guys those guys sort of invited me in and made me feel comfortable more and more, and like, hey, I want you to do this, or feel free to do this, feel free to do whatever you want, and then just slowly feeling like I still to this day have that sense of like, as Doug on Neighborhood Listen or whatever, just being like in and out. Like you have way less time than the genius hosts. Like, don't try to compete with them. Just like, I just have I think I have a pretty good sense of like what makes them laugh or what will be chum in the waters for them to play with, and not like try to be the funniest one in the room, but crack some jokes in the meantime. But sometimes the role does feel like I know how to set them up, whether it's to like roast me or take that somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's been a really fun, unexpected part of the job, but I still do think of it as sort of an extension of my producer, engineer, other role, jack of all trades role or whatever. Like it's pretty rare that I would be invited like on that podcast just for my comedic chops or whatever. It's like, I'm kind of there already in the room and doing all these different things. Yeah. And so I'm there because of that too. Like I'm not going on the CBB tour just to tour around with them, Totally.
One of the first times I ever said something on mic on Who Charted, I'm sure you were there. This was like 9 years ago, probably like 8 or 9 years ago. And of course I was in my head panicking anytime Howard or Kulop was like maybe going to throw to me, and Howard said, what's like a famous movie that you haven't seen? And you said something, and Howard said something, and I think Kulop was like, I've never seen Casablanca. And Howard was like, wow, that's really interesting. And our intern Kevin's here. What about you? And then I said, I've also never seen Casablanca. And Howard went, oh, wow, the same answer as Kulop. Thanks, Kev. Glad we threw it. And it was so fucking funny. But it was the same thing where it was like, it was so embarrassing. But I was like, oh, Howard destroyed it. It was perfect.
Yeah. I mean, he and Kulop were instrumental in sort of bringing me on mic sometimes and making me feel good about it. Like they didn't see status in that way. Like I remember on one of my first days seeing like being pretty overwhelmed with like all the people walking in. And it's funny, in those days, I almost feel like the star power was almost like bigger, like day to day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you would just see, I don't know, like
comedians and actors.
Huge comedians like all the time, like walking in and out, like Sarah and Zach Galifianakis and John Hamm and all these people were like, they're still recurring on the show, but it felt like they were there all the time back then. But like
crazy.
You see this big crowd of comedians gathering, and I just remember like Howard walking like straight up to me being like, hey, I'm Howie, like how's it going, like
that's
who
cool.
are you, you know, like just very fast, like identifying, like, and if I was in the room engineering, he's so neurotic anyway that it's like if there's something in the room with him, he cannot just like ignore it, you know?
No.
So if there's somebody making a weird face or doing anything at all, he's going to acknowledge them. So part of that was like, oh, I think I understand this guy. Like I know how to make him laugh. And to me, that's the game, making them laugh rather than, and also thinking about the audience and like what they want out of me.
Totally. Not overdoing it. Just like setting the host up if they want it, but not jumping in every 2 seconds, finding that sweet spot. Okay, you got an A from the host and a B from the network. Great job. Let's go to the next scenario. As the show continues to grow, Axel gets more and more requests for big, flashy guests. However, he says no to 99% of them. You get an email from the network saying they would like for him to say yes to more of these huge names. What do you do in this scenario? Do you try to encourage Axel to like maybe say yes to more of these people? Or do you tell the network like, I'm going to, whatever Axel wants. If he doesn't want to do it, let's not do it.
I would say there's a middle ground in between the two of these.
Sure.
If it's like somebody who I think would be good for the show and would be like, if Axel's just being kind of stubborn and he's sort of self-destructive in that way, it's just like, I have nothing to say to them or whatever. I'd be like, if it's another musician or something that feels like interesting for him to talk to, I would lightly push on him if I had the relationship with them to take them on, but I wouldn't, not just celebrity for celebrity's sake. I would push back on that.
So we have to choose.
Okay.
You're going to go encourage him?
I'd probably lean towards, all right. What's an example of a big flashy guest?
I would say they are like musicians. Like there are people not in his orbit, but like maybe like a big pop star or something. So it's not someone he normally would have on, but it is objectively like, what's the, we talked a lot about him on Who Charted, the band that sounds like Led Zeppelin. It's like a bunch of 20-year-old
Greta
guys.
Van Fleet.
Yes, it's Greta Van Fleet.
This is tough. I guess encourage Axel.
Okay. Encourage
my
Axel.
Natural instinct is to push back, but
Despite his hesitation, you encourage Axel to say yes to some of these big modern guests to do the show. He says yes, but he sandbags the interview. Makes a ton of passive-aggressive comments to the guest. You get some strongly worded emails from the network saying the guest will never appear on the network again. You get an F from the host and a D from the network.
Jesus.
So you did fail. We will go back to Growing
I'm
Pains.
surprised the network's not more happy about it.
Yeah, that's true. We might get to something similar to that later. So let's go with push back. You explained to the network that while these names are big, they are not people Axel is interested in interviewing. And if he interviews them unwillingly, it might go poorly. So you get a C from the network, but an A from the host. Next scenario, Ruby Voltage starts his own podcast called Ruby Remarks. This was the bass player who we had on for the first episode. Each episode, he listens to an episode of your podcast, Acts of Rage, and provides his POV, often trying to correct Axel's stories. Very petty, pedantic podcast. He claims he wouldn't have started this show if you, Brett, did not edit down the episode like he asked. And to rub salt in the wound, his first guest is the fan that you played guitar over during the Q&A. So in this scenario, would you, Brett, address this maybe on the next episode, or do you ignore it and try to take the higher road here?
Address it, meaning like come down on it?
Yeah, like on the next episode of Acts of Rage, you and Axel talk about it, basically.
See, I have the feeling you're in this game addressing it is not the way I would address it, but I would address it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think I would address it in the way of like just laughing at it and being happy that this is happening.
Yep.
I'm not upset that this is happening because to me, this is like...
It's funny.
It's funny. And it's also like, hey, more the merrier. Like that decision created more content in the world.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's almost, it's bringing more, it's an abundance mentality if you want to go there. Like, he's bringing more attention to our show. Also, this is a horrible format for a podcast in general. I don't think it's going to go well listening to another podcast and
every
commenting
episode
on it and just being mad. So I don't know. How would you think, what do you think my answer is from that? Ignore it?
I think it's a great answer. I think you would address it in the correct way.
Yeah. Yes.
This is what's fun about having people on that are both very talented producers and know me well, is they know how they would do this in a way that would work and know how I'm playing this game.
Yeah.
But let's say address it for the sake of it.
You die.
You basically die. At first, it seems like a rivalry between the two of you, but it quickly gets personal and out of hand, and then Axel quits the podcast. You're fired. So you handled it wrong. Okay, let's go back to ignore it, which is another scenario. Not worth the back and forth here. The bitter old men will get mean quick. Axel appreciates you avoiding this drama, but the numbers obsessed network wishes you would have stirred things up a little bit. So you get an A from the host and a D from the network. We're on our final scenario here, and then I'll let you go. Congratulations. The network has picked up the show for a second season. However, Axel is done. He responds, "Thanks, guys. I had my fun, though. Let's end on a high." What do you do here? Do you encourage Axel to try to do a season 2, or do you say, "Hey, man, if he's done, let's be done"?
I think if Axel's done, if he really doesn't want to do it, then I'll back up Axel.
Yep.
Maybe he'll get in another host. You know, maybe season 2 could be someone else who wants to do it.
Yeah. I feel like this is a scenario, not this literal scenario, but kind of the inspiration for it is I think our role is often put in a position like this of the host wants something, the network wants something else, and we're trying to keep both parties happy. But I've always been pro host 99% of the time in these situations. For sure. Then with that, let's go with backup Axel. The show is a ton of fun, but he doesn't want to keep doing it. Let's stop. You win. Congratulations, Brett.
You win.
If you had
I want to know what happens if I did the other one.
I can't click back, unfortunately. But it says he would have very bitterly done the show and quits the show mid-season because it's going so poorly. And then you lose. And then similarly, I can't click back if you lose. You just lose. So you won. Congratulations. Thank you so much for playing the podcast simulator with me. Thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate you. I owe you so much of my career and everything. I learned so much about podcasting because of you. So genuinely, thank you. Is there anything while people are watching that you would like to plug? Obviously, Comedy Bang Bang World, Who Charted. I always do this and then I jump in and then I say all the person's plugs for them, which is probably not the move. Anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, we talked about Comedy Bang Bang World a bunch. Definitely go there. Who Charted, Improv for Humans, Improv for Humans platform and Who Charted platform. I based off the CBB World platform. So there's tons of good bonus stuff there. Improv for Humans, we're doing tons of really funny, really informative bonus material if you're interested in improv or comedy or just getting more. Let's see. Screw it. We're just going to talk about the Beatles. That's one.
Hell yeah.
That I probably don't mention enough, but that's a show where I'm basically on the panel. So that's a fun one to participate in. I'm really there actually to just be a talking head on it with Will Hines and Joel Spence and Katie Plattner.
Awesome.
We geek out over the Beatles and we have a lot of fun on that one. There's a big catalog there. So that one's great. Lots of fun. And I'm happy to see you killing it in this world too. You've come, I've seen you since I nursed you on my teat. Now you're a full grown boy and you got tons of podcasts and just crushing it out there. So
thanks, man.
I'm proud of you.
Really appreciate it. The chat, thank you for watching, everybody. And if you're watching on YouTube, check me out next week. And on the chat, we'll have Ben Hosley from Blank Check on next Monday. And I'll be streaming some video games this Thursday. So a lot of fun stuff coming out. Brett, you're the best, buddy. Thank you so much. And bye, everyone. I will see you on Thursday.